Okay, it's time for the live Q&A. I have with me Lars. Thank you so much, Lars. We just got your session, and it was really interesting to see what is possible and available for the youth of Africa, especially if they're thinking about taking this game development, game design as a potential career path, or like you're saying, various career paths. We do have some questions that I'm going to throw your way. Remember, we have game keys to give away to anyone who has asked the question. So if you have any questions for Lars, put them in the comments right now. I can see them on my right-hand side. So if you see me glancing this way, you'll know what that's about. First question, Lars, do you know which industries your students end up in? How many have stayed in pure game dev, and how many have started their own studios? What have your previous students been up to?
Yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me, Terence. I'm really impressed with how you guys run all this. That's the big interesting question. Funny enough, like some of the first guys that that finished like 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, yeah, specializing in 3D modeling, ended up in dental labs, because that was the early days of when they changed to 3D printing, and all of a sudden, like, your guys are running somewhere in the medical field, and I got concerned. It's like, did I teach them the right thing, or do we have like old grannies running around with orc teeth at some point, because they get too creative? But in game dev, yes, funny enough, a lot of these guys that end up in game dev work for educational game publishers and stay there. They really love it because it's purpose-driven game development. And some of them are freelancing, but they develop like casual games or games with a specific purpose for companies and games for marketing or advertising. But they do quite a lot of diverse projects, like AR, VR projects for very different purposes. And some of them, of course, do 2 projects and then have to find another job in the industry because they don't make the money back that they expected to make. But some also stay on and even move abroad. We had those cases, yeah.
You were talking earlier about the T-shaped learning that they have to take up, where they start off with very broad kind of all the aspects of the industry, and then they specialize.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned is so that they can communicate better with everyone else that they would be having to work with. But one of my questions was, at what point would someone go, right, I've done enough of the general stuff, now it's time for me to specialize? At what point in their studying would that happen?
Given that we have a 1-year course, this is a 1-year course. So I developed a similar course for a German company, for a German school, sorry. And that was a 3-year education. So yeah, we had to do several other things with them due to how German education works. But what we do is about half a year in, when we've gone through all the basics of how do you plan a game, how do you approach a concept of a game, what are the mechanisms in a game that need to be there, whether you, for whatever purpose you create it for, it needs to be entertaining for the target group that you have in mind. And 3D modeling and then the scripting side of things, we set them up so that after half a year they've understood the basics, hopefully, and then they do their final project. They do research first, we mentor them, and then they have about half a year while we do other courses and most importantly, teamwork projects where they really learn how to apply what they learned in the first couple of months. And while we're working with them on that, they do research, and then the last 1.5, almost 2 months, they have time to work on their final project, do their own research, take their skills further while they're being mentored, and then they hand out the final projects. That is now the case for us. If we had more time, it would happen probably later, but that is the course that we have, and it works really well. And I'm of the opinion, which is why I let them decide the specialization later and not, I want to become a game graphics designer or a game scripter or a game designer at the beginning of the year is because they don't understand what is involved, what it actually requires. So, and sometimes they go like, "Oh, graphics is not for me," and then they lose half a year or a year. So it really depends. I mean, what is important is that they understand, if you know the basics, every new technology that comes and involves game technology and the tools they already learned, they can learn because they know the basics and then can take them further. That is, to me, the most important stuff, because that keeps them relevant over the next couple of years to come.
And I suppose this is one of those industries where it is a lifelong learning.
It is lifelong learning, yes.
You can't just sit down and go, I did this 20 years ago and I'm good.
No, exactly. That's my life story. I mean, I've been in this for 27 years and I'm like, how did we do this back then? Like, I had no flipping clue. But and it's the same today. I mean, there are so many new things coming. We have to think about web and game quite a lot. In my view, mobile apps are going away. That will be web-based and engines for other projects. But yeah, so we have to think about that and apply that.
A question that came through from Monica just a moment ago: How can governmental facilitation support driving lifelong? Well, okay, Monica, you put way too many big words into one question. I'm going to try and do that again. How can governmental facilitation support lifelong learning drives through short courses? So what can governments do, I guess, to help that lifelong learning that we've just been talking about?
Sorry, I need to adjust my headphones here. Yeah, good question, Monica. Thank you for that. There are a lot of ways they can. First of all, people need to understand that lifelong learning is a necessity. Employees and companies need to understand that. We've seen this. We do corporate training as well, and over this year, a lot of people realized we have no clue when it comes to the digital world. So we need to upskill our employees, and luckily, the guys can support that if the company is big enough. There is CETA. CETA does help with that, or the different branches of CETA. But for instance, those projects are quite a hassle to deal with for most schools because of the bureaucracy involved. It should be simpler to get courses accredited for the CETA programs, because I think a lot of schools shy away from that, and it should be communicated to companies. I mean, we do that because obviously our guys need to sell our courses and make them available. The companies should get information on, this is what you can do with the percentage of your taxes that go into that specific funding program, and a lot of people don't know.
So I mean, just the programs that do exist already, we just need more information about those.
Yes,
but
also,
more programs
and access needs to be made simpler. But as I said, like, a lot of people think once they have their degree from a school, they've learned everything there is and do not upskill themselves. There are books to be written about that.
Then we have a question about the actual learning process. With more institutions using gamification for learning, do you believe that this will become the standard? And if it is, are the youth at risk during this transition period because they have to deal with fragmented learning? It's a big question.
Yeah. Do we have an hour? No, there are a couple of aspects to that. I mean, we've developed, me and my team back then in Germany, we developed our first mathematics game for 6 to 8-year-olds in 2006, and we tried to get it into German schools. Forget about that one, especially not in 2006, because of teachers thinking they would be replaced and other, like, prejudice-based decisions. Right now, I can see they will become more relevant tools. Games will become, and they're becoming, more relevant tools as we speak. Whether it's AR or you do a field trip in time to ancient Rome in VR, the problem is, especially in Africa, we have to make the technology available. If we make the technology available, teachers and kids will understand, oh, this is actually a good way to improve learning, not replace teachers, not replace textbooks. That cannot be the goal. I mean, we run into a situation where kids now have to learn and digest far more information than I did when I was at school. So we have to find ways to teach certain basics in a different way and more effective way, and I think games can help with that, and then focus on some other more relevant stuff in theory and via textbooks. But it is a massive question that, in my view, is not discussed enough in the educational field, and I'm coming from the educational field study-wise.
Well, I get a sense that there's a lot more behind that answer, and there's a lot more to discuss there. So,
I could tell you stories, as I said. I could take an hour on that stuff alone. Yeah.
So the person who asked that question, Zane, get hold of Lars. He put all of his emails, all his contact details in the session. Also get hold of him through the networking
absolutely.
Session.
Thanks, Terence. I'm see this as an invitation to anyone out there. If you want to discuss stuff with me, I have a lot to learn. I think I can learn a lot from you guys. So I'm happy to discuss this stuff over whiskey, beer, and anything else.
Brilliant. Lars, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the information and the session you just gave us. We have 15 minutes before the next session, so use this opportunity to maybe drop Lars an email or get hold of anyone else that you might be connected with or wanting to connect with during the last few hours of Africa Games Week. All right, so we have 15 minutes for the next session. We'll see you then.
Great. Thanks, Terence. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for everyone thanks to everyone for attending and having good questions for me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Enjoy the rest of African Games Week. Bye.